Welcome to Cider Chat. In this episode, we speak to an Irishman making cider in Germany. All that and a whole lot more in this episode 251 of Cider Chat.
Going up.
Hi, my name is Rhea Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. This episode 251 means we have crossed over into Season 6. We have been dancing and shouting and shaking and doing a lot of drinking of cider here ever since we posted episode 250, which was a celebration of cider and getting to talk to the nose. What a time it's been, and I really, my heart has been so full hearing from so many people this past week, emails coming in, social media postings, donations. It really stands out and shows to me that all this work of posting Cider Chat every week, spending, upwards to like 16 hours just getting one episode out, believe it or not. Yes, that's true. Just means a lot. And I'm hoping that as we move into Season 6, that you continue to see what an educational resource Cider Chat is and that you share it widely too. Because together we make it all a whole lot better. Yes, there is a reason why we do it like this. It's because we like cider. And that little ditty is sung by myself and my cousin Jay. I am so pleased to announce that this episode has two sponsors. The first is the New York International Cider Competition. It's going to be taking place on February 21st, 2021. Now, this is the third annual cider competition. It's for commercial makers, and they're going to be doing it under all the precautions that we have to do during this pandemic. And they know how to do it because Adam Levy, who runs it, he is setting up competitions around the world, like he does Berlin and all these different countries all over the world. And he's been doing the cider competitions for 3 years. And what really sets this competition apart is that the judges are what we would call real buyers. They're the folks who go down their list for their stores or their restaurants or their bars. And there's going to be a lot of bars lining up, looking at what cider, probably looking at it right now as we start slowly coming out of this pandemic on the other side. Look, folks, we're going to do it and it's going to happen. So these types of folks who are judging, they're really key to the industry. And, big tip of the glass for setting this up on their end and having these very specific judges who aren't like myself or some other judges who might have a little bit of a different type of palate on how we are perceiving the cider. So check it out. I'm going to put a link in the show notes, but you could just go to NYIcidercompetition.com and find all the info there. You have a little bit into February to send in your samples, but shoot, why wait? Send them in now, get them there, so then on their end, they could get them out safely to all the judges in the metropolitan city of New York. Coming up next is the Q&A with Fermentous. I've set up a number of questions that I sent into the folks at Fermentous, and they sent in their quality dude, Kevin Lane, who'll be introducing himself shortly. And they're going to be over the series of the next 8 episodes or so, answering questions on yeast. But I want to say, if you have a specific question for Fermentous, send it to me. And maybe you can get into the Q&A with Fermentous by La Souffle. I just love that name. I just love it. Let's go to Kevin now.
Hello, my name is Kevin Lane, and I'm the Technical Sales Support Manager for the Americas for Fermentous.
This week's question for Fermentous is, what Fermentous yeast cultures are best for creating a sweet finish to my cider? I typically use a blend of apples that are high in acid and very low in tannin.
When a cider maker is targeting a sweet finish to their cider, there's a couple of different things that they could be meaning, one of which would be residual sugar remaining in the cider. The other would be to have a sweetness perception, or really a more complex round mouthfeel. When we were selecting our new portfolio of cider strains, the Saf Cider range, we found a yeast strain that we ended up moving forward with called Saf Cider AS2, which brings sweetness and complexity to your cider. It can be used for sweet and dry ciders from fresh or concentrated apple juice. This strain has a fresh aromatic profile of apple and citrus with a nice elaborated fruit note, more or less an applesauce or cooked fruit. It does bring a good overall complexity with a sweetness and round mouthfeel. Again, this sweetness is not going to be because of residual sugars, but because of the mouthfeel being more full. It is suitable for difficult fermentation conditions and mixes with sugar syrups or simple sugars. It is sensitive to the killer strains that can be used, and also has a fairly average yeast available nitrogen to sugar ratio. We also have a second strain in our Saf Cider portfolio called TF6, which we do recommend for really complex fruitiness and potentially sweetness. However, this strain is not really intended for a dry cider, but rather for more or less for the traditional French type cider where you're stalling the fermentation, leaving residual sugars on purpose. We found that it performs very well in that type of cider, but when it comes to a dry cider, we don't necessarily recommend that strain.
Okay, 2 Fermentous yeast recommendations for creating a sweet finish to your cider. The Saf Cider AS2 and the Saf Cider TF6. So these are little alphabets and letters that you could put into your search engine and you could find out where to purchase it. And you could always go to fermentus.com, and that's spelled Fermentis. It's time now to fill your glass and get ready for a chat with Barry Masterson of Kertelreiter Cider in Germany. I begin my conversation with Barry finding out about the location of his cidery, where he is living in Germany. So let's go there first.
We're in the southern half of Germany, but the northern southern half, so to say. If you know where Heidelberg is, we're on the same latitude as Heidelberg, about 60 kilometers. So what's that, about 40 miles east of Heidelberg? About an hour's drive north of Stuttgart.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of corner. So we're right on the edge of the Odenwald, which is a really, really beautiful, picturesque nature park. So it's a protected nature area with rolling hills and forests, but we're just on the eastern side of that.
So if you were going to be driving from the French border to the east, how long of a drive would that be?
Oh, about 2.5 hours probably.
Now that we know where Kertelreiter Cider is located in Germany, let's find out a bit behind the label and the actual logo that you could find on every bottle of Kertelreiter Cider.
So I'm from Dublin, Ireland, obviously, by my accent. And in Dublin, on the Customs House, there's a set of carvings of the Irish river gods. And you can Google that. And there's these fantastic, characterful faces representing each of the major rivers. And they have, either big beards, and on top of their heads are things that represent, the river. Whether it's to do with trade or whether it's a river in the area that's agriculture producing wheat and stuff. They have these things in their crowns, basically. Unbeknownst to me, actually, my neighbor is a graphic designer, and I was telling her about these ideas and thinking, how could I do it? Because I'd made my own labels before. And she said, I can do that. And she combined bits of that and went through several iterations and came up with the Kertelreiter base, which really brought it back to original concept I wanted. And with the waves of the stream in the background, the tree is the crown, the beard is like roots going into the ground. So it combines all of these elements that were really important to me. And she did a fantastic job, Uli Eifler. So yeah, hats off to her, and she gets cider for free for the rest of her life.
Wow, what a deal! It's very playful, and I do agree. It feels very rooted and does have that mythological base on it. You said that you're an Irishman in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
From what I'm starting to understand about Ireland, is that there's a very long history going way back on cider making. Was this something that was a family hobby back when you were in Ireland before you headed to Germany?
I probably know more about the history of cider in Germany than I do the history of cider in Ireland. I think, it was beer that got me into cider when I was a teenager or a young adult. Cider for me was like a 2-liter bottle of Strongbow or Linden Village consumed in a field somewhere. And later the occasional Bulmers, now called Magners, on ice in the pub. But cider was never something that really spoke to me as something special. But then the beer scene in the late 80s and early 90s Ireland wasn't exactly fantastic either. I think my first trip to Germany was in 96, I think. And that changed things a bit. So my eyes were open to, let's say, other kinds of beer than the usual mass-produced lagers or Guinness that were found at home. And then we discovered the Porterhouse, which is a microbrewery in the Temple Bar district in the heart of Dublin. And friends and I were almost every weekend in there. We could sit all night and travel the world through your glass. They had a fantastic bottle selection as well as their own brewed beers. And this led a friend and I to begin brewing then in 2006, I think. And 2007, myself and another chap, Shane Billings, launched an online community for home brewers in Ireland, irishcraftbrewer.com. And a year after that, we'd moved to Germany, up in Munster, near enough to the Cologne and Dusseldorf area, where I continued to brewing. And irishcraftbrewer.com evolved into Bjór, which is the Irish Beer Consumers Organisation, a bit like CAMRA in the UK, but considerably smaller. But as I wasn't in Ireland, I kind of kept in the background. And it was the likes of John Duffy, Reuben Gray, and Andrew Moore, who sadly passed away recently, who really got kind of Bjór on the road as an organisation. And of course, we have a cider officer, Steve Lamond. So it wasn't just beer, but really any Irish craft product that gave quality and choice to consumers. And definitely in the past few years since I left, there's been definitely an increase in the number of craft cider producers. Not to mention, obviously, the amount of breweries that have sprung up over the past 10 or 15 years. Basically, I turned into a total beer geek by then. I was, beer blogging and whatnot. And the home brewing was really what sowed the seeds to doing what we're doing now. So 2010, we moved down into Schefflenz. So it's not too far from where my wife is from. She's German. And we bought a really old half-timbered farmhouse built in 1779. Started a years-long project to renovate and restore it. I'm still not finished, and I probably never will be. If we are finished, we probably have to start again from the beginning.
It does seem like you have a particular approach to cider making, and I'm wondering, for the other makers in your area, do you stand out a little bit different from the classic German style because they are using a lot of culinary apples and you are using a whole range of stuff? I mean, I have this apple and quince in front of me. Would you say that's true, or is everybody kind of trying so many things now?
When most people think of cider in Germany, they think of, around Frankfurt, the state of Hesse. And that's really because that was the region that really went for making cider or apple vine. By the end of the 18th century, they had the most advanced apple vine factory system in the world. And when I say factory system, I don't mean to be disparaging, but this was a term used by a special agent of the USDA in 1903, when the USDA was looking at cider production in England, France, and Germany, where they were trying to get an idea of basically input on how the cider industry might work in the US. Actually, this report is available online. It's really fascinating reading. It's really strange, the stereotypes that appear about the French and the Germans. But it's interesting reading. But from a historical perspective, looking at cider production in Germany, France, and England at the beginning of the 1900s, it's really interesting. But basically, Germany at the time was the most technically advanced when it came to processing cider, but had maybe lost its soul a little bit. Having said that, at the same time over here in Baden, so Baden-Württemberg is the state now. It was previously a Grand Duchy and a kingdom, and they combined in the 1950s. This was also a huge apple vine producing area. Probably the best area or the best known area for growing apples in Germany is south of here. But in this region, it also stayed small, small scale and local. A bit like it did in England and France at the time. But within living memory in our village, practically every farmer made their own cider. So most, they would call it here a musht in the local dialect. And that's what they drank every day. So beer was too expensive. They only drank it on Sundays. I find it a real shame that a lot of this tradition and heritage has kind of been forgotten. And outside of Hesse and the Frankfurt area, apple vine cider largely began to be seen as a low quality product, whether it was or not. So I think if you went over to the west towards Frankfurt, that's definitely the focal point for cider in Germany. And they have very large producers making large quantities of consistent products that tend to be consumed within the region or found in supermarkets, that type of thing. And I guess they could be equated to large regional breweries that you would find in other parts of Germany. So that's what they drink there. Cider for the masses, which is no bad thing if it tastes good. And then at the other end of the spectrum, also, let's say there's the higher market. If you talk to cider makers internationally, when they think of kind of high market German cider makers, names like Andreas Schneider or Jörg Geiger come up. Jörg Geiger is just south of here near Stuttgart, so he'd be closer to me than let's say the Frankfurt area, and they make really high quality ciders and perries, and I say upmarket because they have price points to match. Like with the craft beer movement, when that came to Germany about 10 years ago, cider is definitely becoming more popular. So you're seeing it everywhere. So some of the big regional makers are now labeling the products as cider. They're adding some fizz to it, and that's definitely following a trend. So they see what's coming. There's definitely a movement towards ciders becoming more popular. But the average German thinks that cider is sweet and fizzy.
I'd like to get back to that tannin piece because I do feel like the work that you're doing with your cider, you're part of that change for cider in Germany. But what is some of the structure that you're able to bring into your ciders that is a little bit classically different in Germany? And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to open up the Out of the Sun bottle that's in front of me, which is, it says a dry cider.
Does that mean I need to do the same? But
well, hello.
It's 5:30 here. I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's probably illegal where you are.
No, not in the cider house here. It's beautiful. Little bubbles going. Oh, man, the apple just pops right out of the bottle. I'm going to pour some.
When we began, I was probably more experimenting. I was dry hopping and using plums and all sorts of stuff.
Well, I want to talk about the cider that I'm drinking right now. Yeah, the Out of the Sun, because it says it has Nottingham ale yeast, which I've used myself, and it's so different from what I would make at home. It's on the label. It says it's a dry cider. When I taste a cider, and I kind of do it from the kind of always approaching it from the beginner's mind of a novice, what I want to experience opening the bottle. And the first thing I notice is the aroma, the bouquet coming out, even before I poured it into the glass. It tastes a little bit young to me. this cider. But the Nottingham is not as forceful as I've tasted in other ciders that I've made or I've tasted from other people. So I'm feeling like you really balanced it with this particular blend that you chose here. Can you tell me some of the apples that you used in Out of the Sun?
If I can remember. I'm sure I have it in my books.
Right.
Yeah, last year wasn't a great year for the harvest. So it was a case of just using whatever we had to hand. So previous years, I would be collecting everything separately. I would do single varieties and very carefully weigh out what's going into the press with, let's say, an in-press blend.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a mixture of stuff. There's Brettacher, there's Goldpermena, King of the Pippins, one of my favorite apples. There's probably a bit of Cox Orange, a tiny bit of Glockenapfel, which are really quite sour. They're brilliant apple for making strudel. And there's probably a tiny bit of pear in there too, but minimal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And with this one, I really didn't do much. So last year, I experimented with a few different yeasts. Previous years, I kind of picked a yeast for that year or went wild. So I've done both in 1 year. And last year, I tried, I think, 6 or 7 different yeasts. So the Nottingham I had read can give good results. I think some people mistakenly believe that using an ale yeast will end up in a medium cider. This ferments dry. But I think it behaves differently to let's say standard wine yeast. There's more esters coming through, but the fruitiness I think is more enhanced. It's certainly acidic, but it's not in a kind of a stripping kind of way. It's more a kind of a lemony zing on the back note. I've grown to really like the acidic ciders, I have to say. Right. I don't think it's anything like Foxwell, which I haven't yet tried, but
it's very bright. It's a very bright cider, and it's a perfect one to pair with food. I could see that, or on a hot, day working out in the field, or wherever you're coming in from home, just to kind of like a wake you up cider in that way. I love the name too, Out of the Sun, because this is kind of something that I would drink, after you're like in the sun, and then you kind of like pull back and like, I need something to quench my thirst right now. And I'd also be really curious to drink this a year from now, because that's what I have found with the Nottingham, that it keeps on melding into a cider once it's been fermented, and sometimes like 2 years out. So I always kind of recommend when you see something like a Nottingham ale yeast to get some to drink now and then hold some for a little bit later and just see how it really evolved.
Don't you?
How is it going in your area for the COVID and the pandemic?
It certainly made a difference for our cider, let's say. So we started in 2019 when we decided to start selling. I mean, that's a story in its own. And we were only wanted to sell locally. Just what he calls a Besenwirtschaft. You're asking how to pronounce that.
Right. Yeah.
Up the hill. And he was buying.
Well, let's talk about what that is, though. The Besenwirtschaft. I'm not saying it well, but
Besenwirtschaft is a traditional way for wine producers, typically, to open up like a temporary inn or pub on their own premises. The rules are very strict, actually. So around here, you're allowed to open for 4 months of the year. And you can only have seating up to 40. It has to be on the premises right next to where the production is happening. And you're allowed to serve cold foods and this type of thing. Not a big restaurant, and some non-alcoholic drink. But the idea was basically for winemakers, and this is a wine producing region where we are, just south of a big wine producing region. And this would give makers basically an opportunity to sell direct. And a Besen is basically a broom, and a Wirtschaft is a business. So basically like a broom business or a broom restaurant type thing. And to signal that a Besen was open, they would basically hang a broom outside, and that's why it's called a Besen Wirtschaft.
I love it. It's so local, and it's kind of like you got to be in the know. Like there's a blue light outside the door or something like that says, "Come here for the speakeasy."
Our specific area, you don't see it very much. And when I say that there was a basin up the hill, strictly it's not a basin Wirtschaft. He's not a wine producer or a cider producer, but let's say it's done in the style of a basin Wirtschaft. So it's very, very cozy, long tables and benches, people gathered together, and the food's really good. It's all local produce, and it has a certain ambiance. And he only opens once every month, plus for events, and it's always packed. So he was selling our cider from keg, and then when COVID hit, he asked if we could bottle. It would be easier for him, so we started bottling, and then COVID hit, and he had to close, and that's when we started then selling direct online.
Right.
So that opened up different avenues, let's say.
Yeah, expanded your business in a different way. Interesting. Well, I guess there's always a silver lining. Does a broom business, a Basin's
Basenwirtschaft.
Basenwirtschaft. Wirtschaft. Does that happen in primarily the fall, or could it happen in any time of the year? I'm thinking the fall is kind of that time where people are thinking about going out into a winery or hopefully a cidery.
They're allowed, as I said, to open 4 months of the year, but they can split that. So 2 months here, 2 months there. So I think it depends. But I think traditionally, yeah, you're right. Autumn around or soon after or before harvest time.
Now that I know how to pronounce Basenwirtschaft, I asked Barry about the Perry pears in his region.
But I don't like walking without a goal. So my goal is always to find more berry trees.
That's fun.
And they're everywhere. They really are everywhere.
Wow.
So I'd say the landscape has changed an awful lot. Over in Germany, they have what's called an open field system. So unlike Ireland, where you've got like hedgerows everywhere and the land is really parceled up and the boundaries are really ancient. When I came over here first, I really noticed the landscape is very open. There's no real boundaries between different tillage or meadows and that type of thing. But in the past, this kind of medieval open field system, they would have had trees planted along the tracks, between fields, this type of thing. So they'd be tilling the land or grazing or making hay, and the parts that they really couldn't make effective use of for normal crop type stuff, they would plant trees along the boundaries. So the whole landscape would have been crisscrossed with apple and pear trees. And in the 1950s, they had what would you call it? Flurbereinigung is the German name. It's kind of a rationalization of the land parcels. So getting rid of the little small ones, swapping land between owners to kind of make it more, I don't want to say geometric, but more orderly, let's say, than all of these little pieces everywhere. And as part of that, and let's say the fields and the tillage area getting larger and larger with modernization, trees were being ripped out and not being replaced. So you find these kind of, it's like a skeleton of a lost landscape almost, but you find big old pear trees all over the place, and they tend to have been left. Well, not all of them, obviously. Apple trees, obviously, they don't live as long. They died, weren't being replaced, but the old pear trees are still kind of there. They're still disappearing, and some farmers are actually planting new rows along tracks, which is really, really encouraging. But it's astounding when you walk around. So we find one tree was a 3.5 meter. You got to figure that out in feet.
I will.
Girth. So yeah, about a meter. So just over 3 feet diameter, I guess. Estimated around 180 years old. And there's a bigger one even. So 3.78 meter girth. Up the hill of Schweizer Wasserbirne. They're the biggest that are around here. Most of them are pretty well aged. They're between 80 to 130 years old generally.
How are you picking those pears?
With great difficulty.
Yeah, it's difficult because they're so tall. Are you
Yeah.
going on a ladder or using like a little
No,
basket?
we just wait.
Wait for it to
Just
fall?
have to wait. Yeah. So what they call it here is Fallobst, so fall fruit.
Uh-huh.
And so last year was the first time I made perry, simply because the apple harvest was so bad. And we didn't. Well, I'm looking out my back window here. We've two perry trees in our back garden,
Hmm.
but I've never used the fruit from them, which is really
Wow.
stupid. Never. This year I'm going to change that this year. And but some farmer friends, so we asked around, and yeah, they said, so all of these trees are lying around, but I don't want to just start stealing fruit. I always ask permission and to get the harvest rights, whatever. And usually people are happy that fruit's being used. So we got access to about 5 perry pear trees. Some we don't know, some I've since identified. And yeah, basically cleared the fruit away from underneath, and then every 2 or 3 days would revisit, and we'd fill a sack. And so we got a good lot of fruit from these few trees. And this year we've got access to 2 or 3 times that, I think. And I'm looking for more, because again the harvest is really, really bad this year. So this is going to be the year of perry for sure.
Great.
And I will be doing more of what is traditional here, mixing perry pears in with the cider
I see.
to bring tannins in.
Great. I just poured the levitation. The color is just exquisite. It's like almost like a kind of like a very light apricot hue to it. A
Yeah.
little pinkish.
Yes.
Haven't sipped it yet, but I know that there's a lot of love for dry perry, and I'm expecting this to be a dry perry. Is that what I should go for here?
It is.
Mm.
Practically everything we make is dry.
Wow, that's delicious. Now, this is so different, and I want to just let folks know listening that if you think of like a perry in France, this is so different than that. This would be more like a UK style perry.
Mm-hmm.
The tannin is just coming through. I could feel it on my tongue, on the roof of my mouth. It has that little bit of sweetness from the pear, but it's really, again, very fruit forward. Oh, fantastic.
It sounds like you're enjoying it, at least, and that makes me very happy.
I am enjoying it. I'm so happy. And this was your first try at making a perry. Well done. Very well done.
I think well done to the perry. It did all the hard work itself, really.
Well, if you have good fruit, I mean, that's to start with, and then it's just kind of having the patience and letting it do its thing. But the clarity's spectacular, and the bubbles.
That one in particular was extremely clear. So it was left on the lees also for 7 months.
Oh.
And it had formed basically a crust, like a chapeau brune, almost like it had keeved.
Mm.
And underneath it was this crystal clear liquid. I could see the bottom of the barrel all the way through. I was quite astonished.
You know what's nice about this perry here that you made, and because it's that dry perry, it's very sessionable. I know it's about 7-something% on it. Let me see what it says. It says 7.7%. It's very deceptive in that way because it's not tasting like that level of alcohol. Yeah. But it's so where I think, oh, I could have something to eat with this. It would pair well, but I also really enjoy drinking it just like this. And that's what I find when you're working with a dry cider or a dry perry, it can be just, if made well, just you could drink it as it is, and you don't need to have anything to accompany it to really make it stand out. Yeah, really well done. So do you blend a bit of pear in a lot of your ciders, as you did like with the Out of the Sun, to give it a little bit more complexity? Is that something that you tend to do?
It's very traditional here. So if you're out there pressing, or so I've pressed for other people, so farmers, and they'd bring their fruit here, and they'd say, throw a bucket of pears in there. It's the done thing. Parts like I mentioned earlier, the apples here tend not to have any tannins at all. So that brings tannins in and a bit of structure, but also helps with the clarity.
Mm-hmm.
So in Frankfurt, as you know, they use Speierling, so Sorbus domestica, for exactly the same reason. All the literature says, going back, that it makes a really fine, clear wine. The tannins help clarify it, and that's what they use there. Although there's a lot of Speierling trees south of here, so I think between Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, they have like half of all the Speierling trees in Germany. But around here, it's quite hard to find. I've been seeking, planted a couple. Our local forester has planted 100 of them, but they're still very young.
Is that for the wood, Barry, that they're doing that
yes,
for?
it is for the wood. The wood is very, as you know, very valuable. And he has planted some in the woods as well, but I don't know if they survived.
Now, those trees that are south of you, are they in like a protected area? And do you have to watch out for like tree robbers grabbing a sorb tree?
I don't know exactly where they are, to be honest. So just by reading that the higher density populations are in Württemberg, south around the Stuttgart area. And of course, around Frankfurt and the Taunus region would be really famous for them. But yeah, my neighbor, who's also a forester, had said, yeah, often people won't reveal if they own a private forest. If they have a Sorbus domestica in there, they often won't mention it because, you might get kind of like cattle rustlers, people going in, rustling a tree because it is really valuable wood.
Yeah. So with the sorbs in your area, have you been able to get any of the fruit and do anything with it in your cider making?
Not yet. So there's a town called Mosbach, actually where my wife is from, not that far from here. And there's a behind the law courts, which is a former monastery. They have a garden there, and there are 2 Speierling trees there. They're only about 25 or 30 years old, so they're not big old trees. But I believe the fruit just goes to waste. Occasionally a seed collector comes and takes some fruit for collecting seeds. But we have the address, so we can ask the regional government if we can have permission to go and raid the court's garden.
I just opened up the apple and quince. And can you pronounce the name of this cider to me? This is from 2018.
Yeah, that's a Goldener Reiter.
Golden Reiter. And
Goldener Reiter, yeah. So the Golden Rider.
And it's a quince. Do you know the quince variety that you're working with?
I do not. So in 2018, we got 450 kilos. So that's about half a ton. You can work that out in pounds. Of quince from various sources. So people heard, oh yeah, he'll take quince, and I had like some lady call at the door, leaving 2 sacks there. It was really strange. So we pressed 450 kilos of quince. There was only so much jelly we could make. My wife makes quince jelly, and I made some pure quince wine. And then in this particular one, I made a 100-liter batch, and it was about 7% fruit in the press, so 7% quince with the apples in the press. They have less juice than apples, so I guess around 5% juice content is from the quince. And I intended to keeve it. It didn't work, obviously. It just kept going. But I think it worked well. So the quince is so aromatic. Really highly perfumed, and there's also a kind of a sweetness to it that I think works really well in a dry cider.
You recently just started selling some orchard implements. You're doing that now for a company? I just saw that recently on Instagram. Let's do a little shout out for that.
Sorry, for a moment I thought you were talking about the old grape mill that I was selling on eBay a couple of weeks ago.
Not that.
Yeah. So I'd been looking for some way to speed up our harvesting, because we do everything by hand. And although the past few years haven't been great, if we get a full harvest with 140 trees for just the 2 of us doing it, it's a lot of work. So I was looking for some way to semi-automate the process, and was looking at various different types of harvesting machine. And most of them have spikes. You roll them along, they spike the apples and drop them into a bin, and then the apples are damaged. As far as I'm concerned, you can't do what the English call tumping, so sweating the apples, which I like to do as well to make sure they're really ripe. So this system is called the Obstraupe, which is translates as the fruit caterpillar, and made by a company called Organic Tools. So for the past few years, they've been developing this system where it has kind of paddles on the front. It's powered by an e-bike motor, and these paddles rotate and basically flip the fruit into a crate that you can then, when it's full, you just drop it out, and you can harvest walnuts or cherries, plums, apples, pears. It'd be great for spiraling, so you're not on your hands and knees.
I love that idea.
These tiny sorbs. So I gave it a test run yesterday. It's astonishingly effective. I was expecting something good, but I was actually blown away. And so we're not selling them, but we are ambassadors for it. So if people want to come in the region and want to look at it and test the machine out, they can come to us and actually touch the machine and try it out.
Yeah.
And they get a coupon from us then, and if they order it, they get a 5% discount. So if anybody wants a 5% discount on a Organic Tools Obstraupe, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram.
Fantastic. I love it. Yeah, I didn't realize it had a motor to it too from an e-bike. That's cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, you're diversifying all over the place, and I really feel like you've brought another level of conversation to the ongoing chatter around cider worldwide. And for that, I really appreciate what you're doing. And this apple quince is really delightful. I thank you so much for sending me your ciders. I look forward. There's 3 other bottles, and I'll be cracking them open as I go along, and certainly sharing my novice viewpoint on it. It's
novice.
Well, it's always good to stay in the beginner's mind, Barry. As you well know, this is a craft, and it's a never-ending learning curve.
Absolutely, it's a journey that never ends, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to thank you for being on this conversation with me and sharing that good knowledge with all of us.
It was great talking to you. I mean, I've been a long-time listener. It's really strange to be actually having you answer back when I'm talking to you.
Definitely follow Barry on social media. On Instagram, he's Barry at Kertelreiter Cider. And on Twitter, he has 2 accounts. One is Bar Mass, that's BARMAS, and the other one is a Kertelreiter. You're going to find just his wit out there, but also occasionally he's putting up different historical documents and just these threads that are delightful. So if you're feeling a little isolated or lonely, reach out to the world because it's right here at our fingertips. And I leave you here. This is Real Wind Caller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
We like cider, we like ponds, we love orchards and having fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason. We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. We like cider, we like ponds, we like orchards, having some fun. There is a reason. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we do it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason why we drink it like this. Oh yes, there is. There is a reason We like walking through the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet. Oh yeah. We like cider.
Oh yes we do.
We like palms.
Oh yes we do.
We love orchards, having some fun. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There's a reason why we do it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
There is a reason why we drink it like this.
Ba-da-da-dum.
Ba-da-da-dum. We like walking down the orchards, dancing in the streets, smelling all the blossoms, kicking up our feet.
Oh yeah.
We like cider.
Ba-da-da-dum.
We like palms.
Oh yes we do.
We like orchards, having some fun.
Yeehaw!